The poignant music of Carlo Gesualdo speaks for a period in which the music of the West was slowly shaping into the style and form which is familiar to us. Florence and the Italian hills of Tuscany were the epitome of that astonishing creative explosion we call the Renaissance. It was as much the new power of trade, of bankers and politicians, as it was that of painters, poets, musicians, and scientists. Powerful families such as the Medici encouraged and supported the expansion of the talents and vision of men of all kinds. As we reach the 17th century, the chasm between the art of the church and court and that of the people narrows. To my mind, this closing of the cultural gap in the life of all men and women is one of the most exciting facts of the Renaissance. One of the most brilliant courts of Renaissance Italy was that of the Gonzaga family here at Mantua. It attracted the most distinguished musicians and artists, and it was here that one of the great events of musical history took place. In this exquisitely beautiful and bountiful landscape, the independent city-states of which Italy was then comprised vied with each other in a display of ceremony, pomp, and elegance. The Gonzaga family was one of the most influential of these many rulers, and Duke Frederick Gonzaga had in his employ no less a composer than Claudio Monteverdi, from whom he commissioned a drama and music for the entertainment of his court. In February 1607, in this Hall of Mirrors in the Ducal Palace, Monteverdi presented his new opera, Orpheus. In an astonishing way, it combined all the elements of modern opera as we know it today. The score was immediately published, and opera, as a popular form of entertainment, spread like wildfire throughout Italy and beyond.
Ma si sprezzo d'amor, la pace e il cielo, salvo la terra e il mar, l'inferno e il cielo.
No, no, non dei più fido amanti odono le voci e il
Monteverdi, by now 40, was to continue creating many more works in this style. Unfortunately, most of these are lost, or only survive in fragments, such as can be found in the collection published in 1638 under the title Madrigali, Guerrieri ed Amorosi, performed here in the Ducal Palace.
Quanto trage d'un cor piange sospiri. Il van gentil guerriero muove in campo d'onor, leggiadro e fiero. Indarno ingegno altero, frigide eterni carni, beltà che non ascolta e non l'apprezza. Oh, barbara fierezza, oh, cor di tigre d'angue, mirar senza dolore, fido amante versar lagrime e sangue.
When Duke Federico Gonzaga died in 1613, Monteverdi moved to Venice, succeeding Giovanni Gabrieli as director of music for St. Mark's Cathedral. This was an ideal opportunity for a man of Monteverdi's genius, for Venice was still a powerful maritime state at the heart of the musical world. It gave him free scope to expand and extend all forms of music, creating a real opera-going public, developing instrumental techniques, refining string playing. The wealthy families of Venice were among the leading patrons of opera, and it was in this palace of the Mocenigo family that many of Monteverdi's operas were first given. Within a few years of the presentation of Monteverdi's Orpheus, opera houses were rising all over Italy in much the same manner as the cinemas of the West in the 20s and 30s. Nowhere were they more numerous than in Venice. Each year saw dozens of new works, the more recent eclipsing the previous ones in splendor and popular acclaim. Monteverdi lived his last 30 years here in Venice. So numerous were the operas composed and performed that it is not surprising that most of them, along with those of now forgotten composers, have been lost. Here, too, was born the conception of making a financial proposition out of entertainment. This building housed the first paying opera theater in all Europe, the Teatro San Cassiano. Anyone able to afford the price of a ticket could attend. A revolutionary idea indeed. Money maketh all men equal. The prosperity of this city and these theaters made opera available to a paying public drawn from all classes. No longer was it restricted to princely and ducal palaces, but it became for the first time a popular entertainment held indoors. Nearly all the opera houses of those days have vanished, along with their music. This theater, La Fenice, dating from 1792, was one of the last of the many built here in Venice. It is the only one to survive and still presents today exquisite opera. Of all the world's theaters, it is one in which I take particular delight. Opera, one could say, was the bridge between the past and the future. It helped to usher in that age we call the Baroque. Why is it that this land, this Italian people, should have given the human voice its most melodic expression in song and in speech? Is it perhaps the warm climate or a volatile temperament belonging to a people requiring frequent emotional outlets? Or could it be a sense of life being but a play and human beings set characters in inescapable roles? Whatever the reason, opera became and remains one of the most popular entertainments in Italy. Audiences are extremely exacting, particularly up there, demanding brilliance and intensity from their performers. And many a singer, not quite able to accomplish the musical acrobatics required, has suffered the shouts and whistles of a disappointed audience. The exuberant Italian spirit had long been abundantly present in the great processions so popular among the Renaissance courts. Dozens of floats, extravagant costumes, and stirring music provided backstage employment for vast numbers. This 17th century was also a period of unimaginable scientific development. Until now, it had been accepted that the universe revolved around the Earth, as this model was especially designed to prove. It was into this crescendo of ideas that such a genius as Galileo was born. Evolving new maps of the heavens, charting the movements of the planets, he upset radically all the assumptions of the day when he declared that the Earth was simply one among the other planets, obediently joining them as they circled the sun. By 1610, Galileo had perfected his telescope, and word of this wonderful device spread everywhere, evoking a passion for measurement. But to the church, Galileo had pronounced the unacceptable. He had eaten of the tree of knowledge, and now must be expelled from the Garden of Eden. Galileo was forced to recant, to deny his discoveries. but even the church could not turn back the clock. Indeed, the clock, that simplest and most precise numerical instrument, was replacing the sun in the ordering of the daily life of the people. Galileo's telescope helped to prove that the Earth was round and not flat. The principle of practical testing by experiment and demonstration was becoming basic to the scientific method. The world's first university was founded in Italy during the Middle Ages. By now, students from all over the world came to benefit from the latest in learning and philosophy, as here at the University of Padua. You can see the traces of their presence painted on wall and ceiling. This beautiful amphitheater at the University at Padua was the first fully fledged surgical teaching theater of its kind. It helped extend the knowledge of the human body, particularly now that Harvey, the English scientist, had discovered the system of the circulation of the blood. No composer had a greater influence on the development of instrumental music at this time than Arcangelo Corelli. Born in 1653, only 10 years after the death of Monteverdi, it was Corelli who established the four-movement sonata and introduced the concerto. This music vividly portrays the exuberant Italian dramatic spirit. It is clearly operatic in its inspiration, yet perhaps because he was a violinist, Corelli wrote no music at all for the human voice. This was the age of Louis XIV, the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil, as he liked to be called. He was determined that his court at Versailles should be the most dazzling and prestigious of Europe. While the king was still a boy, there came to France a young Italian violinist, Giovanni Battista Lully. He was only 6 years older than King Louis himself. Lully was an itinerant musician, earning a precarious living playing at fairs and circuses. His future was assured when he came to the attention of the young boy king, Louis XIV. Within a few years, he had taken charge of the king's orchestra, Les 24 Violons du Roi, and adopted the French name of Jean-Baptiste Lully. Self-taught on the violin and in composition, Lully made internationally famous such music as this, which he played here at the Palace of Versailles. Louis XIV made theater and music a focal point of court life. Here in the marble courtyard, Lully often organized musical spectacles for the king, who was very fond of ballet in particular and often took part in it himself. Lully and his musicians also played for the king's private receptions, which were frequently given here in the Mars drawing room. In entertainment, of course, monotony was to be avoided at all costs. Equal notes gave way to notes inégales, one could say a form of swing. During warm summer evenings, Lully's music could often be heard in the formal gardens of the palace. The patronage of Louis XIV had so consolidated Lully's power over music in all of France that it was expressly forbidden for any theatre to employ more than 2 singers and 6 violinists without Lully's permission. By the time that Louis XIV came to the throne of France, the era of colonization was well established. Much of North America was explored and settled by the French, and the music of these trappers, traders, farmers, and explorers is a lasting legacy. At its peak, the French influence swept from Canada south, round the English colonies of the East Coast, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico and west to the Rocky Mountains. Vast territories in western and southern North America and almost the whole of South America were conquered by the Spanish and Portuguese, who, with the other colonizing powers, virtually obliterated the rich cultures they found in these new lands. The Spanish brought with them the guitar, an instrument with ancient roots, which in time developed its own virtuosity in various styles, amongst them the flamenco. Spanish and Portuguese colonies were already well established in Africa, gathering slaves for their colonies in the New World when the French arrived on the scene. France and England vied for control of these African territories. Here, in what is now Senegal, the French Compagnie Normande was established in 1626. Here, the French encountered a musical tradition that permeated every aspect of life. Songs of celebration, songs of ceremony, sacred songs, and songs to lighten work, as in the harvesting of rice in this Casamance region of what is now Senegal. In daily tasks, the sound of the voice can be as important as the movement of the fingers, the melody and rhythm speeding and easing the necessary work. No music can be strictly called Senegalese, for there are more than a dozen peoples in this country, the Wolof, Peul, Serer, and Diola, to name but a few. This man has good reason to sing out his joy, for he has tapped the palm for sap, which will become palm wine. Before the day is out, it will be fermented and ready for drinking. The beat of the drum resounds like a ground bass throughout all aspects of African ceremonial life. These young men are performing this dance for the last time, for it celebrates their coming of age. Now they are free to establish their own households. Rhythm is the lifeblood of African music. Each player pursues his own independent beat, resulting in a collective rhythm so complex that the conscious human mind surrenders, and an almost hypnotic state is induced in players and audience alike. The variety of musical instruments in Senegal is enormous. One of the most sophisticated is the balafon. Instrument belongs to the great family of xylophones, principally African, I imagine, but extending throughout Asia to Indonesia, to Bali. In fact, it must have been an instrument which, like the violin, spread everywhere. This represents the basic elements of the piano, of the whole keyboard world. In fact, harmony probably began with this instrument, in the sense that as soon as two hands play, let alone six hands, and some xylophones are so big that three people play them, inevitably the resonance must have brought about the sense of harmony, of simultaneous sounds. This man not only plays the instrument, but makes it himself. It is one of the most ingenious instruments I've seen. These incredible gourds underneath the... Quite wonderful, the way they are graded in various shapes. Of course, the upper notes are there, and these are the lower ones. It almost looks very fertile. The other favorite instrument of the Wolof and Serer tribes is the harp-like kora. It is being made by this artisan using age-old methods, from gourds used as resonators and strings held to the neck by tight loops of leather. The instrument maker's son accompanies the work, and he will carry on in the family tradition. There has always been something mystical in the making of musical instruments. Commonplace materials used by a master craftsman on the one hand and performer and his music on the other are joined in a mystical bond, creating sounds which penetrate to the very depths of our being. Kora is a gentle instrument, nothing percussive about it. It is in fact a harp, but to our way of thinking inverted, because the bass strings face the player and the treble strings are farthest away. This instrument is used as a solo instrument, an accompaniment to song, and even to words leading to battle. But you were listening to songs of praise, usually sung to praise a king, but here simply to praise the good Lord. Wherever the African goes, he carries his music with him. Nor will he be alone, even in as abandoned a landscape as this, for very shortly, out of nowhere, come girls eager to dance, as they have danced since they were babes on their mothers' backs. The Africa of today has no more eloquent spokesman than Léopold Sédar Senghor, President of Senegal. His poetry expresses black Africa with a lyricism that approaches music. In fact, he often specifies an instrumental accompaniment for the reading of his works.
Chez nous, curieusement, il n'y a pas un mot pour dire poésie. Pour désigner le poème, on dit chant. Par exemple, en sérère, le chant ou le poème c'est Gim, les chants ou les poèmes c'est Kim. Et les poètes, ce sont des chanteurs et des chanteuses.
Mais la chose extraordinaire de l'Africain, c'est qu'il est toujours conscient de la complexité de la nature. Tous ces rythmes, les polyrythmes, les polyvoix, ça fait partie de ce qu'il entend autour de lui. Tous les animaux, tous les chants, tous les rythmes, tout danse dans la nature.
Pour nous, négro-africains, le caractère essentiel de la musique, c'est le rythme. En Afrique, la musique pure, c'est le rythme. Et une de nos légendes dit que la première prière de l'homme fut faite avec le tam-tam invoquant la pluie, qui battent le rythme de base, et d'autres tam-tam, et surtout un tam-tam coryphée qui improvise, qui solidement appuyé sur ce rythme de base, n'est-ce pas, improvise par contretemps et syncope. Mais il y a également la mélodie en musique. C'est André Gide qui a fait remarquer dans son voyage au Congo que les chants africains sont toujours des chants polyphoniques. Donc, il y a plusieurs mélodies et il y a l'harmonie entre ces mélodies.
Relatives of the violin can be found everywhere in the world. It and its many cousins are the ideal instrument for all wanderers, easily portable, as easily repaired with local materials. Among the Pale people, the sound of the riti is considered a pleasant background, rather as were the king's violins at Versailles. It's quite extraordinary because even though I understand perfectly well what they're doing, the technique is the same as it is on 4 strings. It's on one, they use the harmonic, but very curiously they use the thumb because of course the neck is very thin. It's as simple as it could be, the horsehair serving both for strings and for string and bow. But what one cannot fathom is of course the meaning of the music. It's exuberant, it's penetrating, the rhythm is very interesting. I think it's 7. Ta-ta, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, pa-pa. 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Seems a 7 rhythm, although it's varied very subtly. And it's wonderful to see a violin reduced, as it were, to the simplest constituents of a sound box, of a bridge which can be moved, of a string which is held, simply tied down. The whole pitch is adjusted simply by moving this little piece of wood, which serves as bridge. And the bow, of course, is also merely the way our own medieval bows were, and that they were also the same shape. It's absolutely fascinating. Ils
utilisent tous les doigts.
Ils utilisent tous les doigts.
Ils utilisent tous les doigts.
Attendez. Je trouve c'est difficile de tenir et employer le pouce. All through the world, the violin is favored as an accompaniment for folk dances, perhaps in part because the violinist himself is standing and mobile. Reminders of the Irish jig are heard in many other folk traditions. It is difficult to imagine how such a glorious, perfect, wonderful instrument could have originated in a weapon. This fascinating medieval print shows that the idea is hardly a new one. At the east door of the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, we find one of the oldest images of the bowed string, this moving 11th century carving of King David playing a medieval lyre. such instruments began to sing like the human voice, for at last the strings were stroked rather than plucked. The search continued throughout the Middle Ages for an instrument whose power and brilliance could cut through the noise of the dancers at court festivals. Why should 4 strings, set in motion by horsehair, send shivers down our spines? The players as much as the hearers. And why should violins be so different from each other to the touch? As different, in fact, as the players are. Some sing and some croon and some don't sing at all. My own feeling is that, as in every other field, there have been very few who have had the patience and the genius to master their materials and themselves, whether they are violinists or violin makers or any other people. It is an art that cannot survive mass production. David Rubio, one of England's finest violin makers, works by the same methods and innate feeling as the best craftsmen of earlier times. The voice of the violin is like our own, individual, complex.
If you're making a violin, I personally begin my instrument with the sound of a violin in my head. I carry that sound right through the entire working process. A violin begins off with 2 basic timbres. Pine, which is the universal timbre for all stringed instruments for soundboards, because of its particular resonance qualities, the way it grows, usually under alpine conditions and with very, very hard winters. And this way the grain grows evenly and strong. You have, if you look at it, hard lines, the little red lines which run from end to end, and between them a softer, lighter colored area. The hard lines are impacted resin summer growth lines. Sound is conducted along those resin lines, the summer growth lines, directly from end to end of the soundboard, by means of the bridge of the instrument. The string is bowed or struck. The sound is transmitted by the bridge which stands on the belly of the instrument and immediately conducted along those red lines, those summer growth lines. The other timbre is maple, sometimes with a nice figure in it. At other times it can be quite plain. But it's a hard material and is used for the back and the sides of the instrument. And this forms the resonating box and gives good reflective surfaces for the sound to be bounced and reflected. Now this is a violin on the mold. It's a copy of a Guarnerius del Gesù, late one, about 1742. Inside you can see here the mold. That, of course, comes off at some point in the construction of the instrument. The shape is copied from the original instrument. The sides are the same, fiddleback maple. I think if I swing this over, you can see the figure faintly in the sides here. And it's bent around the mold and fastened with little corner blocks and end blocks to hold its shape. And the neck is then fitted to it. The back has to be carved. Now this is in very early stages of carving, where the solid piece of timber has been reduced so that the rims are even all the way around. A little bit of superficial gouging has been done. But finally, with the use of templates taken off the original instrument, all the curves in both directions will be exactly as the original Guarnerius. It has to be then fitted onto the instrument.
The mid-1500s were a watershed in the evolution of the violin. In Italy, in the town of Cremona, a craftsman named Amati perfected the design of our modern violin. His skills were handed down directly through succeeding generations to the 2 greatest violin-making families, Antonio Stradivari and Andrea Guarneri. In Cremona today, the International School of Lutry carries on in this tradition which reached its apogee some 250 years ago. Most experts agree that Antonio Stradivari, born 1643, was the greatest master violin maker. Following his apprenticeship to Amati, over a period of nearly 70 years, working every day, he made more than 1,000 violins with his own hands, as well as a number of violas and cellos. This violin was given to me, and I was allowed to choose my violin when I was 12 and a half. It was made by Stradivarius when he was 90 years old. In fact, he must have been quite proud of that, because he wrote inside on the label, 90th year. It retains all the aristocracy, all the elegance of a great Strad. This seal, by the way, is the seal of the Khevenhüller family, Prince Khevenhüller of Austro-Hungarian lineage, who owned it. And it has been my companion ever since that thrilling moment when, as a boy of 12 and a half, I held it in my hands. More recently, I fell in love with another Stradivarius called the Soir, after its French owners. It has a brilliance and a body which demand great discipline. A Stradivarius is like a racehorse. It must be handled with extreme delicacy and a certain respect. You cannot betray a Stradivarius. It refuses to accept any excess, and it exposes a miscalculation ruthlessly. Stradivarius was the master of his materials as surely as was Michelangelo of his. To me, it seems that something of his spirit inhabits his violins like an ever-watchful ghost. The masters of Cremona achieved their results not only by patience and skill, but also by intuition. From the Guarneri family, there emerged one man who, in the opinion of many, must be ranked with Stradivari. This was Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, so named for his habit of dedicating his violins to Jesus on the signature label. His inspired instruments are as bold and dramatic in sound as they are in appearance, and what is more, they encourage a bold and dramatic approach on the part of the performer. One of the characteristic aspects of human nature is this constant contrast, this conflict between what the Greeks called the Apollonian and the Dionysian, between this search for perfection, for light, and our need to be rooted in the earth. And these two qualities are best shown in these two instruments. The Stradivarius of 1714, when he was at the very height of his powers, and this Guarnerius, with its strong, rather rough-hewn lines, the F-holes, that's what they're called, are not exactly symmetrical. He could make a perfectly symmetrical, a perfectly exquisite instrument. I've seen a few such. But his real character demanded this kind of abandon, the abandon that he demands of his players, in fact. And this violin has given me the opportunity to express another part of my nature. And throughout my life, I've always moved from the Strad to the Guarnerius. The Stradivariuses have been instruments that I owned and lived with. The Guarneriuses have represented more or less my illegitimate attachments. the England of the 17th century, Samuel Pepys was recording in his famous diary the social and political upheavals of the England of his own time. He told of the restoration of Charles II to the throne in 1660, following the excesses of Cromwell and his Puritans, who had beheaded his father, Charles I. Soon after, the plague returned to England, and as it began to die out, the Great Fire of London of 1666 reduced much of the city to ashes. England produced at this time a composer who, to my mind, is the first of the great modern masters, Henry Purcell. The Elizabethan age had already produced fine composers, Orlando Gibbons, Thomas Tallis, and William Byrd, members of the Chapel Royal who encouraged the printing of music in England. Purcell was well versed in both French and Italian musical fashions, yet his music is of a fluidity and ease which is unmistakably English. To my mind, he is one of the supreme masters of all time, commanding a chromatic harmony with its magical interweaving of many voices. The Tudor England into which Purcell was born, probably in 1659, is beautifully represented by Hampton Court, built a century earlier for Cardinal Wolsey by Henry VIII. Although Purcell loved the theater, he only wrote one opera, Dido and Aeneas, a masterpiece of poignant beauty. In it, Purcell's skills are heard at their height. At its close, Dido sings an unforgettable lament, a song of farewell to life. The purity of style that so perfectly blends words and melody has never been surpassed. It is sung for us by Maureen Forrester.
Thank you.
When hearing such music, it hardly seems possible that Purcell composed his only opera on commission from a girls' school in Chelsea. For me, it is one of the most moving and powerful moments in music. But then, like most composers of his day, Purcell composed his music for special occasions, on commission, and for practical purposes. His sonatas were intended for the pleasure of music lovers gathered together at home, performing and enjoying, for music in England had been an admired skill for a long time. Purcell contributed in other ways too, by revising the famous Introduction to the Skill of Music put out by his publishers, John and Henry Playford. They were well known too for their collections of popular English dancing tunes for the fiddle. The English Dancing Master, in which you could find such lively tunes as this. In 1695, Henry Purcell died at the tragically young age of 36. 4 years later, the Playfords started something new, concerts 3 times a week in a London coffee house. Just as these first public concerts began, English music was to undergo a major change, for in 1714, Queen Anne died and the House of Stuart came to an end, and the German House of Hanover occupied the British throne, and into English music came a German composer, George Frederick Handel. That fluid, elusive quality which had marked English music to this point was about to be bottled up. Handel brought to England a very particular style and technique developed in Germany and Italy. For over 40 years, his sound permeated English musical life. It was the beginning of a long period in which the Germanic influence was to predominate in the shaping of Western music. Handel's sensitive ear absorbed all that was best in the English choral tradition and made it his own. Perhaps no music has been so widely sung by amateur and professional choirs alike, and Handel's great oratorios are to this day beloved by vast audiences. The Renaissance was over. Political and musical power had moved northward, and the 17th century had given Western music control over many new technical and artistic resources. Handel composed this royal fireworks music in 1749 to celebrate the peace treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, but it is as if he were also celebrating his own skills and the very achievements of music itself. ground was now prepared for the vast array of musical styles that followed and for the great works of our classical and romantic composers.